Next slide. Thanks, everybody, for attending today. I'll try not to take up too much of your time. It is a very opportune moment to update DIA and members on the Technical and Support Services panel, which the Ministry has recently established, or is, I should say, is still really in the process of establishing. We went out, as many of you might recall, with an RFP seeking proposal from suppliers in July. It would be fair to say that the timeline for arriving at where we are now has taken longer than what we would have hoped. In part, I think that's a reflection of the very good response that we got. We had 66 proposals come in from industry, and as you would expect, giving those proposals due diligence and going through the evaluation process took quite a bit of time. Where we're at the moment is we've got a Masters and Services agreement, and we're sending those out to those suppliers who have selected to go onto the panel, and we're waiting for those to come back. Once we have that, we'll put a contract award notice on GETS, giving everybody full visibility of who is on the panel. But just by way of background, our project teams will continue to use and rely on external resources to deliver milestones. In particular, as our projects are stood up early in the definition phase and go through to capability delivery and introduction into service, we'll be calling on those resources across the full spectrum of activities. Early on, we're interested in how we can reduce project uncertainty, particularly in the areas of design and financial modelling. And obviously, as we go into introductory into service, we're looking at how we can test and evaluate the capabilities we're introducing. In the past, we've often tended to rely on a mix of external and NZDF expertise. As we go forward, I could see that balance changing, obviously, as demands in particular on the NZDF increase, and there's less people available trying to take those roles. I've listed up there 4 benefits of what we see as getting from the panel. Obviously, the last 3 are largely benefits that we hope to get. I hope the first will appeal more directly to industry, to the suppliers who are on the panel. We're obviously keen to establish long-standing relationships with these suppliers so that we can support capability to delivery together. Up until this point, we've tended to rely on one-off ad hoc arrangements to contract that expertise, and this will put it on a more long-standing and firmer footing. At least that's the objective. Just a brief summary then of the process. I should sort of note as part of that, that introductory or that background slide, what we're trying to get here is, access to those services which we wouldn't normally get through other government panels. Obviously, we use the Consultancy Services panel a lot. A number of you are members of that, but there is a gap of expertise which we need and which we hope to access using this panel. So we issued an advance notice to market in April 2020. As I said, we released a request for proposals in July 2020. We've gone through the evaluation process. We received 64 responses to that RFP, and we've gone through a rather extensive evaluation process given the number of responses received. Results. So the evaluation panel recommended the appointment of 28 providers. That's still a big panel. The coverage that we expect to get from the panel are across a number of areas, and I've just listed them at a very high level there. Of the 28 providers, there is a mix of suppliers who can meet one of those categories or all of them, and it varies across the 28 members. So not all 28 members were selected for each category, and the MSA, which goes out to those suppliers, will indicate which of the categories we see their service as being applicable. Most of them are small and medium-sized companies. In terms of location, they are all New Zealand or Australian based. As I say, where those services could be accessed using an AOG panel, the supplier was not recommended to go on the TSS panel established by us. So in terms of next steps, we've got 28 individual MSAs which have gone out to the 28 down-selected panel members, and they are in the process, I hope, of being signed and returned. The MSA sets out the terms and conditions for any future engagement, as often panels are set up to do, and then the specific terms will be detailed case-by-case basis as part of service orders. As I've mentioned, we will publish a contract award notice on GETS once we've received the MSAs back in from suppliers. We're also in the process now of preparing and having our secondary procurement rules prepared. As anyone who's familiar with government procurement rules, there are a range of secondary procurement processes. As we see it, the ones most applicable for this panel will be competitive quotes, direct source based on fit for purpose, and we've also added location in there. And I suppose that reflects the COVID environment, and in particular, where we might need to do, for example, factory acceptance testing in Australia, we may go to those panels, those members which either have an Australian presence or who are Australian firms. And the panel at a portfolio level will be managed by myself and Hema. And that sort of brings me to a fairly important point. I just noticed as I came in, Jenny has obviously kindly printed off a number of copies of the Auditor General's recent review of government agencies' use of panels. It would be fair to say that review pointed to some very serious gaps within that management, and in particular around what many suppliers saw as a lack of transparency in the management of panels. And also in the lack of any monitoring of performance, including supplier performance. So we are going to obviously learn from the lessons that the OAG has suggested we need to. We will engage panel members on the work that we see as potentially coming their way over the next 12 months. In terms of the MSA itself, we've had the rates that were put forward and will be fixed for 2 years. It's an open panel, so we can receive proposals from others who wish to go on it and who wish to have their proposal considered. And the agreement, the MSA has a timeline of 3 years, but it will be reviewed after 2. And that'll be an opportunity, obviously, for suppliers to feed back the value in which they're getting from the panel. I had an opportunity yesterday to brief our acquisition leads on the process of establishing the panel, but also the benefits and the suppliers who are on it. It would be fair to say that they were all quite excited about the opportunity that this presents. And they are certainly very keen that we do what we can to make sure that we have an active and transparent relationship with panel members.